Howdy folks, it's time to Cowboy Up. Welcome to our celebration of the American cowboy. I'm Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate, and I'm mighty glad to be your host. Have you ever seen the opening ceremonies of the Summer Olympics? There's a lot of pageantry where the athletes from the various nations come into the arena. A few years ago at the Summer Olympics, the American athletes came into the arena wearing something distinctly American, the cowboy hat, because the cowboy is a truly American creation. Today we're going to learn about American cowboys through song and verse. We'll have Dell Shields, the singing cowboy, who is co-host of RFD's Best of America by Horseback. We'll have cowboy poetry from Cliff Sexton and the official Marshal of Dodge City, Marshal Allen Bailey. We'll learn about the roots of cowboy music from Orin Friesen, and we'll finish up with the Diamond W Wranglers. So folks, saddle up and come enjoy the ride.
You don't have to be a farmer or rancher to become a Kansas Farm Bureau member. Anyone can join. As a member, you'll get discounts on things like hotels and entertainment, health and wellness services, cell phone plans, and more. You'll also strengthen the lives of your fellow Kansans and help build strong, prosperous communities through agriculture advocacy and education. Join us today. Visit kfb.org/join to learn more.
I'm here with Dell Shields, the outstanding Western performer and co-host of the television show Best of America by Horseback. Dell, how did you get started in Western music? How did you get started writing and performing these songs?
Well, my dad always sang Western music. My uncle sang it. It was part of our family growing up, and so it was just natural. As a matter of fact, it felt odd not doing that, and so it's just something that I've always had in my blood, as well as the ranch life always being a part of my life. So didn't know anything else to do.
We can tell it's really authentic, and it comes from the heart. And one of those songs that really tugs at the heart for me is your song, Dusty Road. Where did that song come from?
There again, it's a hard luck story about a cowboy who lost his job prematurely out on the ranch. Nobody else is hiring. So he's looking for a place to go. Money's getting thin, and finally goes back home, but there's no home there. The gal has gone, and he's lost out again. So we've all been there and done that sometime or another.
Yeah, it's the tough side of the cowboy life. Here's Dell Shields performing Dusty Road.
Can't believe it's time for leaving. I thought I'd be here through the fall. My bags are packed and my saddle's loaded. My old guitar's against the wall. Hate to leave this old bunkhouse. Well, it's been a real fine home. Trailer's hooked up to my pickup, boys. It's time for me to roam. The word's gone out, no one is hiring. Well, I don't know which way to go. My last payroll's in my pocket. I'll have to spend it slow. Hate to sell off my spare pony, but a cowboy's gotta live. And I won't beg, steal or borrow. I'll give all I have to give. Heading down this dusty road, so lonely I could cry. If I knew where I was going, I might find the will to try. Gas tank showing empty, my pony's thinning too. Sierra, I'm real sorry I rode away from you. Today I sold my little Annie. Lord, it hurt to see her go. I asked the rancher that I sold her to if he had work. He said no. He asked where I was going. I told him I was going home. Back to sweet Sierra, I can't stand no more to roam. Can't believe it's time for leaving. I doubt if I'll survive this fall. Sierra's gone and wed another. Now my back's against the wall. Well, this old truck ain't much to look at, but I guess she'll be my home. Trailer's hooked up to my pickup, boys, it's time for me to roam. Heading down this dusty road, so lonely I could cry. If I knew where I was going, I might find the will to try. Gas tank showing empty, my pony's thinning too. Sierra, I'm real sorry I rode away from you. Sierra, I'm real sorry. I don't know what I'll do.
Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture, represents grassroots agriculture. The state's largest and most powerful farm organization stands up for its members through leadership development, agriculture education, legal defense, environmental advocacy, farm safety, and risk management. Members also enjoy money-saving benefits. To join our organization today or to learn more, go to www.kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Here's a little poem I wrote about Old West and gunfighters that lived back then. This one's called Brother Jim. Me and Jim, my brother, worked the old Lakota mine and panned for gold along the Colorado for a time. We were two young men of vision, came out west to find our dreams. As wild as this unsettled land and restless as its streams, we wound up punching cattle in the fall of '85 from El Paso to Dodge City on that dusty Bar X drive, never dreaming that our story soon would end for me and Jim. We were paid in silver dollars, so we went out on the town to drink a little whiskey and to wash the trail dust down. We had no way of knowing on that dark and fateful night that in that same bar was an outlaw and he was looking for a fight. Now, what was said between them, through the noise I couldn't hear, but I saw the outlaw draw his gun and I saw my brother's fear. And he left him, dying on the sawdust floor, my brother Jim. As I knelt down beside him and I held him to my chest, I could feel his life escaping him through every labored breath. Uncaring, unfeeling, the outlaw walked away. Another notch upon his gun, another killing day. But I swore to Jim before he died, I'd find that man someday, and for the things he did that night, I'd lay him in his grave. Then suddenly he died there in my arms, my brother Jim. I practiced every day till I got faster on the draw. My friends began to fear me for the hatred that they saw. I became obsessed with killing, thought about it way too much. I filed the action on my gun for just the slightest touch. I honed my skills till I became the fastest gun around. I could clear my holster with my gun and never make a sound. And each time I drew my gun, I thought of him, my brother Jim. I learned all about the outlaw, learned how he got his fame, how he got his taste for killing, robbing banks and robbing trains. Some said he was the quickest with a gun they'd ever saw, but I knew somehow within my heart that I could beat his draw. Then I heard he was in Wichita, the lower side of town. There I found him at a funeral with his family gathered round, and as he stepped outside the church, I called to him for brother Jim. He allowed how he was unarmed and unprepared to fight, exactly like my brother when he shot him down that night. Blinded by the many years of anger in my soul, I became the man that he had been so many years ago. And as I left him dying there, his brother held his brow. Now the law is out to hang me 'cause I'm the outlaw now, but if I could, I'd do it all again for brother Jim.
This Medford, New Jersey school bus runs on biodiesel, and so do these. In fact, all of these buses run on clean-burning biodiesel, which is great because the more we use biodiesel in our heavy-duty vehicles, the less carbon pollution in our air. Think how great it would be if more of our school buses ran on biodiesel. More biodiesel, less carbon pollution. More is less. Biodiesel, America's advanced biofuel.
I'm visiting with our friend Orin Friesen, a longtime Western performer and disc jockey, radio personality. Orin, it's great to be with you.
Glad to be with you, Ron.
Orin, let's talk about cowboy music and the roots of cowboy music. How did it all begin?
Well, I think it actually began on the trail drives back in the 1870s. Cowboys needed to entertain themselves. And also, they would use their music to sing to the herds to kind of calm them down, especially the night herd guys. So when they would be, riding around the cattle, usually two of the cowboys would have to be on night herd at any particular time. Usually they took 2-hour shifts, and they would sing to the cattle as they would ride around, just kind of keep them calm so they wouldn't stampede. And I even read a story about one trail boss that he wouldn't hire a cowboy until he heard him sing. So that was part of the requirements for the cattle drives. But then the cowboys didn't have any other entertainment around the campfire, so they would tell stories or they would sing songs. And so that's basically where cowboy music got started, from the authentic cattle drives, where the basic cowboy got started.
They weren't surfing the internet around the campfire in those days, were they?
I don't think so. They didn't find anything on their iPhones either. But, as far as music in accompaniment, I've seen pictures of the guys on the trail drives where they had an old banjo. Because a banjo is a rugged instrument, you could throw that in a chuck wagon and it would hold up pretty well. Sometimes they would have a fiddle, they had a little hard shell case. Harmonicas were popular, or just, no instruments at all. the image of the singing cowboy with the guitar came along much later than that, because I read where it said that back in those days, in the 1870s and 1880s, the guitar was more of a lady's instrument, and it was often a parlor instrument, and they were much more fragile than a banjo or a fiddle in a hard case, and so that's kind of how the early cowboy music was.
So it was in the later years when the guitar really came into vogue, which makes sense when you think about the conditions on the trail drive. Orin, as we get into the real history of cowboy music, Western music, country music, we find there's some distinctions there.
Well, yes, I think of cowboy music as being the next step, or actually started on the trail drives. And there's still cowboy singers today. Usually a guy with a guitar singing a song, that's a cowboy singer. Western music came along during the era of the silver screen cowboys. You look at bands, and like Sons of the Pioneers would be probably the one that would be given most of the credit. There were other bands before that, but most of the time they were doing string band type things where maybe there was one guy singing. But once Roy Rogers and Bob Nolan and Tim Spencer started doing these three-part harmonies, and then they brought in Hugh Farr on the fiddle, and then later his brother Carl Farr on the guitar with these intricate jazz chords, which was real different from just the solo cowboy singing songs with one or two or three chords, when they would get all this fancy stuff. And so that's really where Western music, the lush harmonies and the more complicated chord structure. And then country music, it used to be called country and Western music. Well, so they would include, because back in the early days of country music, Gene Autry was huge. And then later on into the 60s with Marty Robbins and all that, there was a lot of Western cowboy type songs. But eventually that kind of went away, and the country music industry in Nashville just dropped the Western part. It just became country music. And Western music, as we know it, kind of fell by the wayside. And that's where the Western Music Association came along to kind of pick up the slack for that. So
Absolutely.
Now country music and Western music are pretty much two separate genres.
Back to the authentic cowboy songs that it all began. A number of those actually go back to maybe Celtic ballads from the old country.
Quite a few of them do. And a typical example would be the song Streets of Laredo, which was originally an Irish tune called The Bard of Armagh. And later in Scotland they called it The Unfortunate Rake, and it became over to this country. It was the Dying Girl's Lament. And finally a fellow from Kansas by the name of Frank Maynard, who was on a cattle drive down around Medicine Lodge, he rewrote the song about an incident that took place at Tom Sherman's barroom in Dodge City, Kansas, and he changed it, and that became a cowboy song, the Dying Cowboy, or the Cowboy's Lament. And of course he was one of the few drovers that was actually from Kansas. Most of those guys were from Texas, and so those cowboys took the song back with them to Texas and changed just a few words in it. Now we know it as the Streets of Laredo. But that's one of the many songs probably that have Celtic roots.
That's how it all began. We'll learn more about cowboy music and Western music history with Orin Friesen. Stay tuned to Cowboy Up.
About 6 jumps later, I was laying on the ground and thinking, boy, my shoulder sure hurt. I kept waiting, and it didn't get better and didn't get better. I'd heard about Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center on the radio. Got down there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 11:30 the procedure was all over, and it just kept getting better and better. And within 6 weeks, I was back digging post holes and doing the other hard work that I'd been doing before the accident. And I'm really pleased. It's really worked out well for me.
The Rancher and the Cowboy. This poem is an example of how independent cowboys are and how they value the dignity of labor over the fruits of labor. The rancher said to the cowboy, "I know what I've asked of you ain't very much fun, but if you're going to work for me, you've got to do what needs to be done. You can go back to twisting broncs and punching cows when we're through putting up this hay. But right now, take a hold of that pitchfork and start to earn your pay. And then the cowboy said to the rancher, I'd done my part of pitching hay and digging post holes before I left home. I painted barns and strung fence. You see, Mr. Cattleman, that's why I left our ranch to roam. So when you need a hand to round up and work your herd, I'll work from sunup till after dark with never a cross word. But while you're putting up this hay to winter feed your cattle, I'll be in town having some fun and soaping up my saddle.
Welcome to the Jerry Thomas Gallery and Collection, where we showcase my renowned frontier military and Native American artifacts. Behind me you see a touch of fall. We put together not only the beauty of Micah Highwalking, who is the first graduate of West Point of the Northern Cheyenne people and a dear friend, but also a Hudson's Bay blanket that I have here in the gallery. The unique opportunity that I was able to have was we unveiled this painting and surprised Micah at Custer Battlefield, a true honor.
I'm with Jim Farrell of the Diamond W Wranglers. Folks, if I was to write a movie script, it'd be about a young man who goes to Nashville, finds love, and hits it big in the music business. Well, in this case, we have the reverse of that story. This young man came from the music business in Nashville, literally grew up in that business, and ended up coming to Kansas, and now part of the Diamond W Wranglers. Jim, tell us a bit about your history and how that came about.
I was in music publishing for about 17 years, and my publisher was retiring. The guy I worked for so long, just knew him for years and years and years. And I had an opportunity, Sue called, to come up here and do a chuck wagon with cowboy music. Now, we had been in a band down in Nashville, about a 4-state tour, J38 Land and Cattle Company. We had a chuck wagon and everything, and it was a lot of fun. And he just called and said it was a great opportunity, so I came the first year in 1999 and drove from Nashville every weekend. 750 miles.
That's quite a commute.
It is. And I had a little half car, got 30 miles. It just about paid for my tickets. You know, it was just about right. And then finally, in 2000, moved up here, and we did 7 years at Prairie Rose. When it changed hands, we changed our name to Diamond W Wranglers. And that's what we were known for today.
And one of the great songs of the Diamond W Wranglers is Cabazon,
yes,
based on a real story.
It
Tell
is.
us about that.
This is the two Castillo brothers. There was a place called Cabazon, the head of the giant is the translation of that. And a little town, they had hard times, and these two brothers used that to not only poach a few for the people, but stole herds of cattle. Well, they sent for a fellow over in Bernalillo County, close to Albuquerque, the sheriff there, and he came over and he had a reputation for shooting first and asking questions later. Well, they cornered him several times, and wounded, they got away twice, and they disappeared. No one ever knew what happened to them. And so we thought that was a great story, and a great spirited story, and the music reflects that also. We have a lot of fun with it.
The story is set to music. Here's Diamond W Wranglers, Stu Stewart, Jim Farrell, Steve Crawford, and Chip Worthington with Cabazon.
By the head of the giant, east and west of Cimarron Valley, stands a village so quiet, el puesto del cerro Cabazon. Los hermanos Castillo son dos hombres malos. They stole the cattle of Richmond in the shadow of el cerro Cabazon. They sent for Jesus Montano, sheriff out in Bernalillo. He tracked them into the mountains, where he had posse slipped away, riding through Espanola, out along the Rio Grande, and La Tienda Luzano, Jesus laid a trap of his own. Los Hermanos Castillo came to rest there at Lusanos, not knowing they were surrounded. They sat down at their ease. The sheriff aimed through the back door. He shot one brother in the side. The other ran to his comrade out of the door. Waited till morning, tracked their footprints in the snow. They led him down to the rail yard. Where they went, no one has ever known. By the head of the giant, east and west of Cimarron Valley, stands a village so quiet, el puesto del Cerro Camazon.
Folks, it's been great having you with us today. Special thanks to our guests on today's show, Dell Shields, Orin Friesen, Marshal Alan Bailey, Cowboy Poet Cliff Sexton, and the Diamond W Wranglers. This is your host, Cowboy Poet Laureate Ron Wilson, saying, cowboy songs and poems lift spirits like the coffee in your cup. So come on back and see us next time as we all cowboy up. Happy trails.
Have you ever stood at your back porch window and watched the snow blowing by? Or in your pickup truck with the windows down, feeding cattle as it drifts up high? Or you're dreading the walk down to the stock tank, you gotta brave that ice, and your forehead's froze, you got a runny nose, but oh how you love this life.
Fort Wallace was the fightingest fort in the West. Fossils, Indians, soldiers, scouts, wagons, trails, pioneers, stories. Discover the story of Fort Wallace and the people who served here, the people who fought here, the people who settled here. Wallace County, where the past is present.